I never thought a simple job application could change my life. But there I was, standing nervously in front of the palace gates, clutching my resume as if it were a lifeline. My name is Marissa, a 28-year-old Filipino caregiver with dreams far bigger than my paycheck back home. I had heard whispers from friends who worked abroad. The British royal families, despite their wealth and status, had a peculiar preference. They liked hiring Filipinos. They said it wasn't just about skills, it was about heart, humility, and reliability. And honestly, at the time, I laughed it off. Who would think a royal household would notice someone like me from the other side of the world? But my skepticism melted away the moment I stepped through the palace doors. The grandeur was overwhelming, every room a mosaic of history and wealth. Chandeliers that must have cost more than my entire family's house, tapestries from centuries ago, silverware that gleamed like it had been kissed by angels. Yet amidst all of this opulence, the people moving quietly in the background caught my attention the most. They were calm, smiling just enough to feel human, attentive, without being intrusive. And almost all of them had one thing in common: the unmistakable warmth of Filipinos. I had barely set my foot inside the staff quarters when my trainer, a cheerful older lady named Liza, came over. She had been working here for over a decade, and her smile carried decades of untold stories. "Marissa, welcome," she said, her accent thick but clear. "You will find this job is nothing like the hotels or hospitals you've worked in before. Here, the royals notice even the smallest things." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She winked. "Like making their tea exactly the way they like it, noticing when someone's having a bad day, knowing when to step forward and when to disappear. And yes, your heart matters more than your degree." I spent the first week shadowing her, absorbing the rhythm of the palace. I learned the subtle nods, the quiet timing, the way you move like a shadow without ever being invisible. Every meal I prepared, every room I polished, every patient I assisted, it all mattered. The royals had eyes everywhere, and yet they somehow made you feel like you were part of a secret world, an invisible circle of trust. It wasn't long before I met Lady Charlotte, a young princess with a mischievous streak. She had hair like spun gold and a smile that could melt the coldest marble statue. "You're new?" she said, circling me like a curious cat. "Do you know why my family hires Filipinos?" I shook my head. "Because you're polite?" She giggled. "Polite, yes, but also you notice things, you care. And you don't get flustered when everything goes wrong, which it always does." She handed me a cup of tea she had just spilled on the tray. "Here, fix this. I dare you." I hesitated. A royal's tea spilled? My hands trembled slightly. But I took a deep breath and cleaned it up, rearranged the tray perfectly, and set it back with a flourish. Lady Charlotte clapped. "See? You're already better than most." Word spread fast. Soon, I found myself in the private quarters of the Duke and Duchess, assisting in ways I hadn't imagined. They weren't the haughty, distant figures I'd pictured from the magazines. They were human, sometimes frail, often awkward with emotions, yet surprisingly attentive to their staff. I noticed something fascinating. They would quietly observe the Filipinos working, the ones who moved with care and respect, and they would nod subtly, sometimes passing small tokens of appreciation, a handwritten note, a favorite dessert, an extra day off. It was subtle, almost invisible to an outsider, but it was there. One afternoon, I was asked to accompany the young prince on a short carriage ride through the palace gardens. His usual attendant was sick, and I was thrust into the role with little warning. I had never held the reins of a carriage before, and the horses seemed to sense my nervousness. The prince, a boy of about 10, looked up at me and smiled. "It's okay, Marissa. I trust you." I laughed nervously. "I'm not sure if the carriage trusts me yet." He tilted his head, studying me. "You're different from the others. You notice things. You listen." It was in that moment I realized what my friends meant. The royals didn't just hire Filipinos for their skills. They hired us because we brought a certain presence, a sense of calm, reliability, and warmth that money could never buy. We were not just employees. We were invisible guardians, quiet pillars in a house of grandeur. Days turned into weeks, and I became more comfortable in my role. I had developed a gentle rhythm with every member of the household. I knew which tea the Duke preferred in the morning, how the princess liked her curtains drawn, and even when the young prince needed a bit of distraction from royal duties. I learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken, and slowly I understood the secret behind the whispered admiration of Filipino workers. We carried something intangible: resilience, attentiveness, a heart that genuinely cared for others. Of course, there were funny moments. One day, I accidentally mixed up the footmen's uniforms. 3 of them showed up in mismatched jackets and trousers, and I had to do a quick, improvised wardrobe correction. The Duke walked by and paused, raising an eyebrow. "Are they performing a new fashion show?" he asked dryly. I laughed nervously. "No, sir, just cultural exchange?" He chuckled and moved on. The staff, however, never let me live it down, teasing me mercilessly for weeks. Then there was a time I tried to bake traditional Filipino bibingka for the staff party. The oven settings were completely different. The flour behaved unpredictably, and somehow the batter overflowed. By the time the Duchess arrived, our kitchen looked like a flour snowstorm had hit it. But instead of anger, she laughed soft, genuine laughter, and said, "Marissa, this is the most fun I've had in ages. Who needs perfect when we can have joy?" I realized then that the royals valued spirit, effort, and heart over perfection. One evening, I was quietly sitting in the staff lounge, sipping tea after a long day. Lady Charlotte came in, holding a small wrapped gift. "For you," she said. "You've made this place better." I unwrapped it to find a tiny, hand-painted porcelain figure of a Filipino woman carrying a basket of fruit. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She smiled. "You've shown us something we forgot to value: the quiet dignity of people who work with care, who love without expectation, who don't ask for recognition." My chest tightened. I had never felt so seen in my life. As weeks passed, my colleagues shared stories of their own experiences. Liza, my trainer, told me about a Filipino nurse who had cared for the late Queen's brother, gaining such respect that he personally requested her to assist him in every hospital visit. Another colleague recounted how a Filipino chef had secretly taught the palace staff local Filipino dishes, leaving everyone impressed. The pattern was clear. Filipino workers were quietly changing lives in royal households, not through ambition, but through kindness, patience, and competence. It wasn't just about royal preference. It was about trust, human connection, and integrity. And for us, far from home, it was also a form of respect that transcended wealth or status. We were valued not because we demanded it, but because we embodied something universally human. I remember one particularly tense day when the palace hosted an international delegation. Everyone was on edge, fussing over etiquette, seating arrangements, and timing. I was tasked with preparing refreshments and ensuring the small children of the delegation were comfortable. In the chaos, one child started crying inconsolably. I scooped him up, sang a soft Filipino lullaby, and within minutes, he was asleep in my arms. The Duchess came over quietly and whispered, "That's why we prefer Filipinos." "You just do what's right, naturally." I blushed, realizing that the most valuable skill wasn't training, experience, or education. It was empathy, patience, and presence. One morning, I was called to the Duke's study. My heart raced. Perhaps I had made a mistake. But he handed me a handwritten note from the Queen herself. It read, "Your work has been noticed and appreciated. Your demeanor, patience, and respect are a testament to the strength of your people. You make this household better." Elizabeth R. I couldn't stop smiling. Not only did I feel proud, but I also felt an overwhelming sense of connection. I thought about my family back home, the sacrifices they made, the long nights I'd worked, and how it had all led me here. Months turned into years. I learned the intricacies of palace life, the subtle politics, the quiet routines, and the small acts of kindness that made this household function. And through it all, I understood why British royal families, and indeed many other elite households around the world, preferred Filipino workers. It wasn't just competence, it was heart. We didn't seek recognition, we didn't boast of our skills, but we cared deeply for the people we served. That care, that unwavering dedication, became visible to those who truly mattered. Sometimes I would catch the Duke or Duchess glancing at me across the hallway. A subtle nod of acknowledgement, a small smile. And in those moments, I realized something profound. We, as Filipinos, carried a light that transcended wealth, status, or geography. We were humble yet resilient, gentle yet unwavering, ordinary yet extraordinary. Of course, not every day was perfect. The young prince occasionally tested my patience, spilling paint during art class, hiding my cleaning supplies as a prank, or insisting I join him in his imaginative adventures. I would groan, pretend to scold him, and then laugh alongside him. These moments reminded me that my job wasn't just work. It was part of a family, a world far beyond what I could have imagined. There were funny cultural misunderstandings, too. I once prepared Halo for the royal staff, and they stared at it suspiciously. "Is this dessert?" one of them asked. I grinned. Yes, and it's Filipino magic. By the end of the day, everyone was raving about it. The chef even asked for my recipe. I had to stifle a laugh and say, this is a secret only Filipinos can do properly. Through it all, I understood the unspoken truth. The royals didn't hire Filipinos for pomp or spectacle. They didn't care about titles, status, or showy skills. They hired us because we made their world smoother, kinder, and more humane. And in return, we gained respect, trust, and a family far from home. Years later, as I looked back on that first day nervously stepping through the gates, I realized how far I had come. From a nervous applicant to a trusted member of the household, I had witnessed firsthand the subtle power of Filipino dignity and heart. I had laughed, cried, and even been chased by a mischievous prince across the gardens. But above all, I had learned that in the quiet moments and the unnoticed details, we made the difference. And maybe that was the real secret behind the British royal preference for Filipino workers. It wasn't just skill, it was soul. It was patience, it was kindness, it was laughter in the halls of grandeur, and it was care without expectation. That invisible thread connected us to them in a way wealth could never buy. So yes, they preferred Filipinos. And after everything I had experienced, I could understand why. Because we didn't just work for them. We carried their world with us, and we did it with heart.